Hi everyone, I'm Tom Timbrell of Beynon's Blacksmithing. I'm a professional blacksmith, cutler and living historian. Now unfortunately, due to the pandemic, I'm unable to bring my blacksmithing demonstrations to you in person, but don't worry, we're going to do this all virtually now to help everyone celebrate the 900 years anniversary of Reading Abbey. So I've made a series of short films, each one making a different item relevant to the Abbey, relevant to its history and to the lives of the people who may have lived in or around the Abbey, maybe even have helped build it as well. So sit back, relax, and we hope you enjoy them all. During the medieval period in Britain, the blacksmith held a special place in society. Their knowledge and skill with working metals such as iron and steel made them incredibly important to the local community. When thinking of the village smith, most people's first thoughts go straight to the idea of them forging things such as swords and weapons. Although in some instances this would be the case, the reality would be the day-to-day work of the village blacksmith would have been a lot more mundane, however, no less important. So rather than making items like the mighty sword for a knight, the village smith instead would find himself forging out items such as nails, bill hooks, axes, and of course the very recognisable horseshoe. And while making these items may not seem particularly glorious, certainly not as glorious as forging a sword, what has to be remembered is that the village smith would have been the only one who knew how to make these items. This reliance upon the blacksmith led to them quite often becoming very wealthy, but very importantly being able to wield a lot of power within the local community. Ultimately, this meant the very last thing you wanted to do was to upset your local blacksmith. If you did this, they had the power to refuse to make your tools next time you needed some, and very soon you would find yourself unable to bring in your crops effectively or to continue with your craft. On the face of it, blacksmithing looks fairly simple. You take your metal and place it into the center of a fire, in this case fueled with charcoal. You then have a pair of bellows. These are to supply extra air into that fire to heat it up to incredible temperatures. You pump the bellows until you've reached the desired temperature, remove from the fire, place onto a hard surface, such as an anvil, and then strike with a hammer until you achieve the desired shape. Of course, blacksmithing is far more complicated than that, and the secrets of the blacksmiths were fiercely guarded. The only way during the medieval period that you would have been able to learn this craft would be through indenturing yourself into an apprenticeship. Now this would either happen by parents paying the blacksmith to take their child on, or if somehow managing to convince the smith to do so. Children would go and start their apprenticeships from as young as 7 years old, maybe 8, 9 or even 10 years old. And the apprenticeship could last anywhere from 7 to 14 years in length. During this time, that young apprentice will be taught not just how to forge, not just how to wield a hammer, but also how to read the temperature of the fire, the temperature of the metal, to see whether it is ready to be worked, how to make charcoal, how to smelt iron from the ore. All these parts of the craft would be taught throughout these years, and they'd learn many different techniques that would allow them to tackle anything the local community could ask them to make. For those children who had been sent to learn from the blacksmith, it would have been a grueling time. As apprentices, they would have been the bottom of the pile in the workshop, and they would have been doing a lot of the legwork, a lot of the striking, a lot of the jobs that most likely the master smith didn't want to do himself. What we always have to appreciate as well is within these workshops, it wouldn't be a single blacksmith working as you see here. It would actually involve perhaps a couple of master blacksmiths. All of their apprentices. We have records of blacksmiths taking up to 12 apprentices on their own. And of course, there would even be journeyman blacksmiths passing through. A journeyman smith at this time would be a blacksmith who has finished his apprenticeship, is regarded as a competent craftsman, but isn't a master smith yet. And so what happens is he travels around the country working in different forges for different master smiths, learning extra techniques from them, and also earning some money to hopefully one day save up enough that they are able to open their own workshop and become a master smith themselves. It seems there was never a shortage of willing apprentices wanting to become blacksmiths. Certainly becoming a blacksmith was a good way for many of the lower classes to raise themselves in status. Plus there was also the fact that generally speaking blacksmiths could earn a very decent living, if not become fairly wealthy themselves. For the master smith, having so many apprentices had a big advantage for him, as essentially they were cheap labour. He only had to make sure they were fed well enough and kept well enough. But for him, it meant that he was able to meet the needs of an entire town or large village. One of the big downsides, though, was, of course, all those blacksmiths in one place. The noise could be quite something else. And we have records of people complaining to local parishes, to city councils, complaining about the noise coming from the blacksmith's workshop, how none of their household can sleep because of the sounds of their hammers on their anvils and them working late into the night, and how the foundations of their houses are being ruined by the vibrations from their sledgehammers, and wanting the council to move the blacksmith out, away, perhaps to the edge of the town. Despite whatever grievances local people may have had against the blacksmith, it is undeniable that they were incredibly useful to have nearby. And in fact, one of the main jobs, as said before, for the village smith or the town smith would have been making agricultural implements, but very importantly, making the tools of other craftsmen. Without the blacksmith, people like stonemasons and carpenters wouldn't be able to continue with their craft. And it's those exact same stonemasons and carpenters who would have been building the abbey in Reading 900 years ago. In fact, what is being made here is a pair of dividers that were found from the abbey site itself. We can just imagine perhaps those dividers having been used by a master mason to measure out angles, to produce plans, to scratch it out on plaster so that other craftsmen could follow to produce that abbey. All of which combined knowledge and experience and cooperation between different craftspeople, including the often overlooked blacksmith.